Well, Jerry, let's kick things off with a really important question. Is it tough being so handsome?
Yeah, I would say it's been a deficit over the years, especially now that I'm married, just having all these beautiful women throw themselves at me and just chasing me down the street and stuff. It's a problem. So I regret all the work I've had done, Now, it's not a problem I've had to worry about. I have a comedic face, not a leading man face.
Yeah, people tell me I have a face for podcasting. I don't know what that means. We we roll with the punches. All kidding aside, and since the theme of the show is really to showcase some of the nonprofit work, we will get into that and we'll ask several questions because you've done some amazing work and raised a tremendous amount of money. But I do want to talk a little bit about the career journey. Actually, I just listened to the book. We'll talk more about that in a second, but it gave me some amazing insights. Let's do a few of the highlights and maybe start with the Kentucky Fried Theater, which is really where your professional career seemed to have started.
Yeah, well, just backing up a little bit from that, my dad had a friend who had this videotape equipment back in 1970, and it was a huge, heavy thing, half-inch reel-to-reel tape, and the quality wasn't as good as my iPhone, and it was black and white. We got a hold of it and we started to play with it. David and Jim and I and another friend, Dick Chudnow, and it was the most fun because we could just do some goofy thing and then look at it and then do it again and just we could play and it wasn't really very portable and unless you had like a long extension cord, but you still had to have some. But it was so much fun and after we accumulated a lot of these bits, we put together 20 minutes and showed it to people, and they were laughing. And so we said, "Hey, we should start a theater. We want to show this to people." And it was very Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland kind of, hey, my I have some costumes, I have a stage. And so we actually built a little theater in the back of a bookshop in Madison, Wisconsin, where we all went to school. And we combined it with some skits, and a little bit of film and whatever. And it was really a anything goes philosophy. And that was just fun, but it's not really our thing. And so we started to get more and more sort of serious about it. And then when the year ended, I that was my last year in school, and David and Jim had actual jobs during the week. But we decided we didn't. We wanted to continue it. We wanted to pursue it, but we weren't going to make any money at in Madison, Wisconsin, and nobody else was going to see us really. So we packed everything up in a U-Haul truck and moved to Los Angeles.
You are probably best known for co-directing the iconic movie Airplane, and you're, as you mentioned, with your childhood friend Jim Abrams and your older brother David. I would highly encourage, and I think I just mentioned this, but everyone either reads or listens to your book called Surely You Can't Be Serious. I'm encouraging people to listen to it is because the three of you, plus a lot of the other actors, a lot of the famous people that have commented on it, that, it's amazing. It's really a who's who of people and, Trey Parker. I mean, it's just unbelievable. All the people that you have in there, which is
And
awesome.
it's one thing to get these people to, well, some comments were things that they had that were in print and not directly to us. It's one thing to get people to comment, but to get all these people to actually go on tape was pretty amazing.
Well, I think it's testament to who you guys are. And again, just you set the bar. It came through over and over again, just like what a different and new type of movie Airplane was and how committed you were to your craft. And to that end, I would like to dive into a few questions that people who haven't read the book yet or maybe don't know you as well don't know about. The first of which is amazing to me, is you had a strong commitment, almost at the sake of the movie, to who it was that you wanted to have act. And the fact that you had people like Sigourney Weaver, Bruce Jenner, and this guy named David Letterman all sort of interviewing for these various parts that ultimately Robert Stack and Julie Haggerty and others ended up taking. So talk a little bit about, like, maybe just give the listeners a taste of what you and David and Jim were really committed to and making sure that you stayed true to the movie?
Our whole motivation really for doing the film, or our guiding thing, was the idea of having these actors play it absolutely straight. And actually, in fact, we didn't tell the actors play it straight because people kind of, well, a little goofy, but they think they're playing it straight. And but everybody wants to be funny, but we told them, pretend that you don't know you're in a comedy. I mean, that's the thing. Is this kind of comedy we wanted to do would be killed by people winking and being comical, really, or at least it just that was our vision. And a lot of that came from years growing up in Milwaukee, watching all this serious stuff, these B movies and all these TV shows, Mission Impossible with Peter Graves. And yeah, now when I say Mission Impossible, they think the movies, but the whole TV show and The Untouchables, there was and we loved those shows, but we would also laugh at them. And there was a real um it was a style of acting where everybody really took themselves so seriously, and they were playing in a lot of the dramas. They were playing tough guys more than nuanced characters. So we loved that, and I mean, at least for comedy, we thought that was good. So we really were doing that even with our show. I can't say we played it straight exactly, but it was always about the joke. We never played characters because we weren't looking for someone to discover us, or for us, the fact that someone did an incredible character of an old drunk lady or something, whatever it was, that wasn't for a lot of people would watch that and say, wow, that's great. That's entertaining. And it is. I don't, but for us, it didn't fit into what we wanted to do.
Yeah, it sounds like the planets really had to align for it to get made, which,
Yeah.
not to get hokey, but I'm a big believer that things sometimes are meant to be, and it feels like that movie was meant to be put into the universe. And I know it impacted me growing up. I know it's impacted a tremendous amount of the people you interviewed in the book that are comedians, and they absolutely were blown away by just, how important it was to them. You mentioned Sarah, and Bill Hader and others. One thing I did want to touch on, you and I on our prep call talked a little bit about this guy named Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which I'm assuming people have heard of, right? Pretty good basketball player for the Lakers. He played a kind of a crazy role in the movie, right? And it was funny listening to trying to get this 7'2" guy into the cockpit of an airplane. You said to me, it's people think that he's a little bit, I can't remember the exact word, like arrogant, but it's really
I
yeah,
mean, they're arrogant, but he's actually just very, very shy. And I don't know. I think he's not a public speaker kind of a guy. It's funny. Contrast it with Magic Johnson, who I've seen get up at an event and no notes, and he's just goes on and he gets laughs and he says great things about people. Kareem was just he wasn't that way, but he was great on the set. I mean, once he got to know us and everything, and he never gets gregarious. He's never, but he's a good guy and would do whatever we asked him to do, and it was yeah.
which is impressive considering there were some quite a lot of gags that you get all of these different sort of famous people to do. I do want to ask one more sort of funny question about the movie, and then we'll move on. I want to talk a little bit about Leslie Nielsen and something that I chuckled endlessly as I was listening to this. He had this fart machine and apparently was going around and trying to make everyone laugh, and everyone thought it was a hoot. A lot of other people actually got their own fart machines, but talk a little bit about that whole experience and working with him and what that must have been like.
Yeah, well, Leslie was great. The other three guys had various takes. Peter Graves, when he first read it, thought the script was disgusting, and I think his family thought it was funny and talked him into it and whatever. But he was great, in for a penny, in for a pound. But I don't think he ever really got it. I think when he saw the picture, he loved it, but he said, "Oh my God, look at me! I'm a comedian." But Leslie Leslie was always a clown trapped in a leading man's body. He really did have a great sense of humor. Leslie loved we never had to bring him down. He just loved being absolutely deadpan and just like he would do it in a drama, but he got the comic timing of it. He was Les was fantastic, but he did have this thing. Well, this is how much of a clown he was. He had this little machine that was probably maybe this little smaller than a cupcake. And if he squeezed it in his hand the right way, it made a very realistic farting sound. He would do that all the time. It's very funny. And then I think at one point the AD had to say, okay, it had to take
Enough
it
is
away.
enough.
Because,
Yeah.
oh, I remember now, he actually got them for everybody in the crew, or a lot of people wanted them, and he had a bunch of them made. Uh, and then everybody was fighting, and cracking up, and it's like, okay, now this is cutting into our ability to get things done. But he also sometimes we'd like walk on an elevator with Leslie, and he he'd put on this straight leading man face, and he'd maybe be wearing a sport coat or a suit or something, and he'd do this little fart. I mean, he was an anarchist, and I think we shared that. And so we really both came into the film loving this idea of acting completely serious and doing something really stupid.
Well, and poor Julie, if you listen to the book, she's such a sweetheart and so dear and so innocent. And she talks about the first time he went up and he did it, and you said, "Oh, Julie," and she was mortified about the fact that someone might have thought that she had farted on set. Um, yeah. Anyway, I did want to move on to there was another. You did several other well-known movies, but one that was sort of polar opposite of that was Ghost, right? Iconic. You have the scene of Demi Moore. She's with the late Patrick Swayze. Let's talk a little bit about the story that led you to make that movie, because you make a funny comment about it in the book about your wife, Janet, and her sort of role in the scene. So I won't steal your thunder.
I was having lunch at Paramount with Lindsay Duran, and I think this was maybe after Ruthless People or something. I don't know. And she said, "Well, I said, what do you have at the studio?" And she said, "I think the best script we have here is a script called Ghost, but it's not a comedy. It has comedy in it." And I said, "That's fine because I'm not really looking for a comedy, certainly not a satire. I would have been fine with a different kind of comedy, but I just didn't want to repeat what I had done so much of at this point." And so she gave me the script and I brought it home, and I'm a terribly slow reader. It's my Achilles heel. And so, it's like always, yeah, no, I'll do that tomorrow or the next day or that's whatever. And it sat there on the night table and my wife picked it up, and she's a voracious reader and she couldn't stop. She read all the way through and said, "You have to direct this. This is a great script. You have to do this." So that was, and so I finally did read it. I mean, she probably forced me to. It wouldn't, and wouldn't lock me in the bedroom or something. I don't know, but I, and then I agreed, and I called Lindsay, and we, you know, talked with Paramount and all. But I was lucky because I don't think I don't think any other studio would have considered me to direct it, but because it was at Paramount and they knew me, it was different.
I'm not here to blow smoke, but I will say to be able to have the ability to do movies like Kentucky Fried Movie, and to do such a beautiful, serious movie with just such a. I mean, I remember even to this day watching it, you still get dusty in the scene where she's doing the pottery, right? I think everyone would. So
Yeah.
kudos to just being such an amazing director that you could, really flex both sides of those, or, have the muscle to do both of those.
A lot of that is getting a great script. I worked with Bruce. I mean, he did all the writing, but we went through many drafts. So I felt like I had, a lot of input, but it was a great script. When I got it, it had a beginning, middle, end. It was emotional. It had a lot of humor in it. And that was another one that I would say was, you could make a case it was meant to be,
I totally
because,
agree. Yeah, no, I totally agree.
that cast, and yeah, something willed that into, into,
You nailed it. Well, and then speaking of your wife, Janet, you did go on to work with her on a couple of other movies. I think most spouses, and you've been married for a long time, agree that it's not a great idea to work together. What was that like, and how is that different from The Obvious with Jim and David and working with them?
yeah, it was. That was interesting. I mean, the main difference is that I wasn't sleeping with David and Jim, but it's great actually. I mean, maybe if we were both directing it or something, it wouldn't have worked out. That could have been a disaster. But with produce, she understands the mechanics of producing much better. I'm more of a just creative producer, and she's very creative too, but it kind of divides things up a little bit. And then when she produced Rat Race, which I directed, that actually went amazingly very smoothly because, she treated me like a director. I'd like to get that around the house.
Wouldn't we all?
Would be nice, yeah. But everybody on the set of movies, generally everybody is trying to help the director achieve his vision for the film and all that. And it's more like budget kind of stuff. We can't afford this or that. That worked well until actually in the editing room, she came in one day and said, "I don't like that. That was," and I said, "Get out." But no, that was it actually amazingly enough worked pretty well.
Well, I kudos to you for making that work. I do want to shift gears a little bit, and this is the portion where we talk about the societal good, the charitable work you've done. And so, just to recount a little bit, in 1990, your 11-year-old daughter at the time, Katie, was diagnosed with diabetes. So let's talk a little bit about the journey. You got sort of enrolled to go to DC, to Capitol Hill, to talk to one of the senators so he could help fight against this draconian bill that would have put scientists in jail for doing life-saving research on stem cells. So what was that journey like? And,
Yeah. Well, we first were. I mean, the first thing when she was diagnosed, and we talked to people about what they're being worked on. So everybody's talking about stem cell. At the time, it was embryonic stem cell research, and we're trying to raise money for the JDRF, Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. And then there was this bill proposed, and it actually passed through Congress to criminalize it and criminalize scientists. And I don't think people just really knew what it was exactly. And it was so bad that I think if you went to a foreign country, technically, and got cured with stem cells, they could arrest you when you came back into the country. This is nuts.
it's absurd.
It's just absurd. I mean, the irony is a Nobel laureate scientist or somebody in the top of their field can't get in to see a senator, but the director of airplane can. So yeah, just the way it works. And so we hired a lobbyist, and we took a scientist with us, a guy named David Anderson from Caltech, great guy, very brilliant. And we went to see, I don't, we saw like 10, 12 senators. We just would, go from office to office, and a lot of them Republicans, because those are the ones who were against it. And we actually became friendly with Orrin Hatch, who was a bit on the fence, and ended up coming out on our side, which was a big deal because he was powerful at the time. And also, he gave other senators kind of cover, other Republicans. They didn't have the votes, and it never came to a vote in the Senate. So it got killed. But that was an interesting experience, being in Washington. And it's kind of part of it, you're sort of amazed. Look at this. It's 275 years or whatever. And it's just you see all these uh, congressmen, senators walking around, and and it's somehow it's working on the other hand. And it was very empowering to think I could go and maybe make a difference talking to someone. There were a lot of other people, and we certainly helped, but Christopher Reeves and Michael J. Fox were both involved in that.
Well, and the upside to that, and thank you for sharing that, is that I believe this led to the founding of the California Stem Cell Initiative, which
Yeah.
you mentioned in the book raised $3 billion. And so bless you for doing that. And that's amazing. To be able to raise that much money is crazy.
But I will say this, it is crazy, but a state senator named Deborah Ortiz was the one who actually first mentioned that to me. And I thought, what? I had no idea you could do this. And Janet and I talked about it, and Janet, I'm great at saying, what, we should do this, and then doing nothing. And Janet is actually great at doing things. We just got a whole bunch of people at our house, people we thought might be interested. It wasn't a fundraiser. It was just like a brainstorming session. And we had Deborah Ortiz brought her campaign, the consultant guy or whoever to who knew a lot about ballot initiatives to come and talk to us. And we got educated and started to talk. And it was interesting. We've done a few things that way where it's just started with what can we do and how is this possible? What we do, and then it just started to grow. And then we brought on this guy Bob Klein, who really drove it home and made it happen. And it's just that also, it's great that you can have that we're able to have that kind of effect. On the other hand, I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of the ballot initiative because it's just, best commercials win.
I do want to get onto the second chapter of some of the great work you've done, and that was in 2008. A gentleman named Ralph Cicerone, who was the then president of the National Academy of Sciences, reached out to you and Janet looking for a way to use movies and television to communicate the importance of science in people's lives for the survival of the planet. God knows we could use more of that today. Let's talk a little bit about how that led to the establishment of the Science and Entertainment Exchange, which is an initiative that aims to provide the entertainment community with these resources and scientific information by connecting filmmakers with science, medical, and engineering experts.
It was advocating for stem cell research, got us together with a lot of scientists, and we love these people, men and women who are quite brilliant, and they're really, for the most part, and obviously there's egos among them. They just really want to help humanity and cure diseases. So when Ralph came to us, we were already kind of predisposed to doing something in science, although we hadn't thought about, we weren't necessarily looking to do anything at the time, but he came and we sat down, and his concern was just science was behind the eight ball in terms of messaging and and people's opinion of science and scientists, and a lot from the right being attacked uh, and make and also we felt that our industry was partially responsible because movies always portray them as egomaniacs out to either create life or destroy the world or own it. Or when I ask scientists how they got started or what made them interested in science, it seems like almost half of them say Star Trek or Star Wars or some series. After even X-Files, more women went into science. And there's a classic story of the Fonz when the Fonz got a library card.
This was happy days for those of us who are not old enough to remember. I do remember it fondly, but
Happy days. And so he wanted to use that power. So what we decided was that we just find a way to bring scientists and filmmakers together. So we started with this symposium. Neil deGrasse Tyson was there, and Steve Chu, and Vetter is his name, who sequenced DNA, and Lisa Randall was there. There were tons of really great speakers, and we had big talks. And where in the first part, and then breakout sessions where you could go just listen to more information from one or two speakers or whatever. But it was a big success. And then the other thing is we started a like kind of a service. We have a hotline sort of that any writer, director, producer, whatever can call. And if you're, whatever kind of movie you're doing, if you want science information, we'll arrange, and especially now with Zoom and it's easier to do, and the scientists love it. And you can ask them questions about how is this done? And you could also just brainstorm with them about something that can't be done. Like this want to send 8 astronauts to Pluto. How would we do that? What would be the problems? And they'll help you figure out a way, even though it won't work. It's at least movie credible.
And one of the things I did want to sort of talk about just in terms of talent. So you and Janet are the vice chairs on the exchange, but you had some really impressive advisory board members, people like Seth MacFarlane, Dustin Hoffman, Rob Reiner. How did you go about getting these amazing, super famous people to join your efforts?
These they're all sort of people we knew. At the time I didn't know as well, but we had connected because I I'm a fan of his satire, and he was up there. He's done a bunch of homages, and stuff. So I asked him if he would um, be interested in hosting the first symposium, which he did, and which was just great to have that kind of representation. Dustin Hoffman, we've been friends with for years, not through movies. Our daughters were friends.
Interesting.
And, that was nice. And Rob also, I've known for a long time, and I don't remember how we met. He's um, and of course, being on an advisory committee does not exactly require, hours and hours of input, but it's nice.
Well, Jerry, do you have a few more minutes? I know we're a little bit over, but we'll wrap up soon. But I have a few fun questions I'd like to ask you.
Fun questions. Go.
I'm really curious to see how you're going to answer these because as we opened up with our sort of straight-laced question, but what is the dirtiest sounding word that isn't actually dirty? And the example I think I gave you was spatchcock, which is a
Yeah.
way of preparing a
I
chicken.
I think there are probably a lot of those names. There's a plethora of those names, and plethora is maybe one. I don't know. The first name that came to my mind was fiduciary.
Ooh, I like that one. That's a good one. And plethora does sound like a feather tickling or something like that.
Something up, or no, it sounds like I think she has a something caught in her plethora. I don't know what it was. Anyway,
This is good. This is the spirit that I wanted you to take this in. All right. So we talked about a lot of famous people, but one of the things I like to find out, like I was shocked, Albert Bourla, who is the CEO of Pfizer, he said meeting the Pope. That was the most impressive person, and he's Jewish, meaning the Albert Bourla, not the Pope. So you've worked with a lot of famous people in your life. Who has impressed you the most? What one person really blew you away?
that would be O.J. Simpson. No, I'm sorry, that's not.
Impressed you in a different kind of way, right?
Uh, well, I don't know. I'm sure I met Elton John when he was uh, uh, sober. I mean, still is, but he made that commitment, and had a big poster in his house. It said something like, "Without Bernie Taupin, I would be nothing." He's and the work he's done with AIDS, and for someone who had a rough upbringing, I thought it was terribly impressive. I mean, it's maybe an odd choice because maybe I should choose, but I never met Gandhi or the Dalai Lama, so I don't know. But anyway.
No, it's actually that's a perfect answer, and I really like the thought process behind it. Someone that is so famous but is doing such good in the world and really
Yeah.
pulled themselves up by the bootstraps.
Yeah.
Speaking of music, one band that you didn't see but you wish you had in concert.
There are so many that I didn't see because I was not a regular concert goes, but of course the Beatles. I mean,
Yes.
The Fab Four would have been great, but the Beach Boys, Queen, all would have been terrific. I heard Abraham Lincoln had a band. That would have been good.
That's a good one.
It
No, I like that
wouldn't
one.
be. I would.
Two more left, and then we'll wrap this up. So, one person you'd like to meet, could be living, could be dead.
Well, Sir Isaac Newton would be fun. He contributed probably more to science and the theories that we follow today, and at a time where how did he figure that out? He must have been like psychic or something. I don't know, or had a connection. I mean, he was truly brilliant. If I had to pick someone living, I actually, oddly enough, I think I'd love to meet Bill Gates just because of what he's been doing. That his philanthropy is has just been outstanding, and he's who has saved more lives than Bill Gates in the world? I mean, maybe Jonas Salk or something. I don't know what those numbers would have been, uh, but he's just he's dedicated to it, and it's also
Speaking of our last question, and this is a little bit selfish, but now that you know the premise, getting to know people, knowing what they're doing from a societal good, who else would you recommend being on the show?
well, the guy that would have been great is Jim Abrams, but he's not with us anymore. Was his child had epilepsy, and he was getting all these operations and drugs that made time. And Jim went to the library. This was before the internet, going through the card catalog or whatever and reading this about it and found this thing called the ketogenic diet. And now Jim has really saved lives through this. And I would be at his house sometimes and he'd get a call and he'd say, hold on a second. And he'd be talking to some woman about how to use the diet. They started the Charlie Foundation. If your child has epilepsy, you should definitely go to the charliefoundation.org and there'll be people. Jim founded it with his wife Nancy Abrams, and the two of them together have just done amazing work. Yeah, so I mean but I don't know. I'm not sure who else I know who's done that, but probably just because I don't remember anything anymore. Happened, unless it happened like 30 years ago, then I'd remember.
Right. Now, Jim's a perfect example, and I was thinking that it was too bad that we couldn't have him on the show because of all the amazing work that he's done with epilepsy. With that, that's a perfect moment to wrap things up and to say thank you so much for taking the time, fighting through our technology issues up front, and telling your story. And I think for anyone that's listening, please go out and either buy or listen to the book, go back and watch Airplane, go back and watch Ghost.
Yeah, if everyone should just watch only our movies and read only our book.
There
That
you
would
go.
be great.